Welcome to my writing channel, and today I'm going to be discussing the revenge scene in Season 2, Episode 2 of The Last of Us. I'll also have thoughts on the rest of the season, but in particular I want to discuss why that revenge scene ultimately fell flat. Something about it felt wrong, and what I want to do is explain why. Obviously massive spoilers from here on in, and also this is not going to be discussing the games because I haven't played them, so I'm only going to be discussing what we see in the show. To that end, I'm going to be discussing the difference between text and subtext, or the difference between what is actually being shown to us, the focal point, and the subtext, the elements underneath that. And secondly, I'm going to be discussing the difference between revenge and vengeance. And then finally, I'm going to be discussing how one of the reasons that the scene also fell flat was that it sort of felt disconnected from the rest of the story. And so with that out of the way, let's get into it. So the first thing to point out is that when we're talking about things, when we're talking about objects, or just like the thing in discussion, that thing is just a focal point. And in reality, the drama, the tension, everything about the story, all the character arcs, everything is the things or the elements behind or beneath that thing. And so for example, we can take, let's say, a humble pen, and we have two characters that are arguing over the pen. And one character says to the other person, "Oh, you've bought a really cheap pen." The argument is not over the cheap pen per se. The argument could be, and most often is, it's something to the effect of, "You're a cheap person, and only a cheap person would buy a pen like this." Conversely, the argument could be over, "Oh, this is a really expensive pen." And well, underneath that, it could be that, "Oh, you're a person that spends a lot of money. And in fact, you're not very good at saving. Only a person like you in your position, you're the type of person that would buy this kind of pen." It could also be someone that's careless with the pen, and indeed that would be someone who's generally careless all the time. And so this is the case with virtually anything that characters are talking about. You have the text, you sort of have the obvious focal point, the thing that's under discussion, and then you have the subtext. And the same is true, of course, of revenge or vengeance. That's a thing. That's a thing that's going to be enacted. That's a thing that a person feels that they want. But what we care about as the audience is how that impacts them as a character. And for that, we have to understand who they are as a character, as a person. We have to understand their arc. And typically, in sort of revenge shows or revenge movies, the vengeance or the revenge happens at the end. So we have this arc that goes all the way to the end, and then it's sort of in a moment. It's at the end. Typically, if we're talking about violent revenge, the protagonist, the good guy, they'll either have a gun, they'll have a knife, and they have a chance to kill the main bad guy, the main antagonist. But then a lot of the time, most of the time in fact, they don't do it. They decide, "Oh, in that moment, this is not who I am." But they couldn't have decided that halfway through the movie or 3/4 of the way or 90%. It could have only have happened in the moment of highest tension, of highest drama. And that is when we understand, or where the sort of the character understands who they are as a person. That's where we get really good drama, we get really good storytelling. And we don't really get, well, typically, we don't really get sort of anything after the vengeance or the revenge. It's either they've done it or they haven't. And then we have the end of the show, end of the movie, or what have you. As you can see, one of the problems here with this is that it happens in episode 2 of episode 7. And even though it's only 7 episodes, I think it should have been 10, but it still happens too quickly. So the revenge happens, then it's almost like the rest of the story happens after the scene of Abby killing Joel. We now need to discuss the difference between revenge and vengeance. And starting off with revenge, generally speaking, you can think of revenge as being something that's more in the moment, more impulsive, and sort of a deviation from who you are or who the protagonist is as a person. And so you can sort of think about yourself as you roughly have your sort of baseline level of emotions, who you are during the day, during the week, during the month or whatever. And then a spike comes along, and that spike might be you feel like you've been wronged, you might feel like you've been attacked, or there's some other emotion, something that's spiked within you where you really want to get back at someone. And it doesn't have to be in terms of violence, but in terms of just the fact that there's a rush that comes in the moment, and typically it will subside fairly quickly, but there is that heightened emotions and you really want to act on those emotions right now. And so typically it's a shorter term feeling, and it might even be overnight, where for example you go out, you feel like you've been slighted by someone, or you want to get back at someone. Let's say you don't do it, and then you wake up the next day and then you think, "Oh, actually it's a good thing that I didn't do it," because you can't maintain that level of intensity, that level of intense emotions. And the feeling of revenge or seeing it in a character is something that's quite relatable because we've all felt that. We've all felt slighted in the moment. Even if it's something as simple as someone brushing past you really fast and being really careless and they bump into you and then they go about their day and they don't even notice you and you want to get back at them in the moment. And then seeing that, or seeing a violent urge, a similar violent urge in a character in a show or TV or book or whatever, that's instantly relatable. And it's also because a lot of people in real life, let's say it's violent revenge or let's say it's murder, most of the time people regret it. And most of the time when witnesses or family members, let's say, or people who knew the person who did the act, when they talk about the person, they'll say, oh, the person is normally like really normal, really chill dad, let's say. He'd be like, a person you meet at Sunday barbecue, Sunday afternoon, stuff like that. And this is sort of out of character for him to take out this violent revenge or violent action or whatever that resulted in someone's death. And that's a typical characteristic. It's a typical way that revenge sort of plays itself out. And the same is true actually for most murders. The vast majority of murderers actually regret their actions. And in fact, remorse is typically taken into account with sentencing. And it might surprise you to learn that most murderers either are able to get a lighter sentence because of this, or that in fact they do actually regret their actions. But then when you think about it, it couldn't be any other way. If it was the fact that we're all surrounded by psychopaths who didn't regret their actions and could murder someone without giving a second thought, societal cohesion would be impossible. This contrasts with vengeance. Vengeance you can sort of think of more, firstly as being longer term, but also as more of like a sort of a hitman type vibe, where a hitman we typically think of as sort of cold, calculating, they know exactly what they're doing, their emotions sort of aren't involved. There's more planning, and you can sort of imagine them sort of scoping out, let's say, a secure location, gathering information, and this might happen over the course of a year or two, or even, let's say, over the course of half a decade or something. And with that kind of character, there aren't these heightened emotions involved, because that kind of intensity is impossible to maintain for long periods of time. And so, if you are perhaps cold and unfeeling, it's possible for you to carry out such operations over a longer period of time and then really decide how you're going to take out your vengeance. And so you can sort of imagine that kind of person. They've done their research, they've done their homework, they go in, let's say they send the intended message, they might torture the person, they might kill the person, and then they'll clean up the crime scene and then they'll leave. And that's sort of your cold-blooded killer. However, that's generally much harder to relate to because it's not someone I can relate to in my life, or indeed with who most of us are as people. Now that I've explained all of this, let's put all of this together, and this will help explain in concrete terms why the scene felt wrong. So we see Abby and we see her crew, and then that's where we find out that her father was a surgeon who was killed at the end. He was completely unarmed. It was a completely almost senseless death, and so it's very easy to understand why Abby would want vengeance. And it's also not too difficult to understand that she might want Joel to really suffer before killing him. In this world, there's no justice. There's no outside justice that they can refer to, so they have to do it themselves. They have to hunt down Joel. Joel's already escaped, and they're going to follow him. And I was thinking, oh shit, Joel only has a little bit of time. It might be over the next few weeks before they catch up to him. But in fact, we're told it's 5 years. Now that it's been 5 years, that sets the tone differently. So now they finally get to Jackson, or they get close to Jackson. And the first things first, when they see the town, and this is actually extremely important, they say, oh, this is the most fortified settlement that we've ever seen. How are we going to get in? It's not like we can just waltz into the town. And so they're all a bit surprised by this, and then they hole up in the house. Okay, that's one thing. So then the snowstorm comes in, and then Abby goes out, she's on patrol, but then she inadvertently spots Joel and Dina on horseback, and she goes after them. However, also inadvertently, she wakes up the zombie horde. The zombie horde chases her, and I guess it is very coincidental, but whatever, that's fine. Joel rescues her and takes her inside, like this sort of barn area, and that's where Dina calls out, oh, Joel! And that's where Abby then immediately knows that's the person that she's after. Okay, that's fine, so she gets rescued, and he really wants to go to the town, which makes sense because it's a fortified location, but then she somehow persuades him to, in fact, oh, let's go to the house instead. again, that doesn't make too much sense if you're being chased by a horde, hundreds or thousands as far as they know, zombies. But whatever, they make it to the house. However, in the meantime, the attack on Jackson is ongoing. And as far as they can see, these thousands or tens of thousands of zombies have overrun the town. So as far as they know, the most fortified, well-defended town they've ever seen has just vanished before their eyes. And yet, very few react to it. From the perspective of that group, they don't know that there could be tens of thousands of other zombies preventing them from getting home to Seattle. There's almost no reaction to the fact that Joel rescued Abby. And yes, it's literally brought up. He says, "Oh, I rescued you." And she says, "Oh yeah, but to what life?" But the problem with that is that we don't see how these other elements, we don't see her necessarily rethinking. It's like, oh shit, I really did get rescued by him. I'm only alive because of who Joel is as a person. I mean, he could have left her behind, and that would have spoken to who he is as a person, and she would understand that. So first and foremost, it's been 5 years, which means emotions have calmed down, which means she's sort of settled into a new normal. However, when she goes in, two things happen. Firstly, she does lose her cool, which is interesting, and that speaks to her character. But simultaneously, she also is in control of the situation for quite a long period of time. She's explaining things to Joel, she goes down near him, and she's sort of pacing, and we sort of don't really get a sense of much of humanity behind her. We don't really get much of a sense of her character. And that's a real shame, because so much more should have been made of the fact, well, firstly, it's been 5 years. And so she sort of had that time to build up fantasies in her head of how it's going to be when she finally meets Joel. And then it finally happens. And then it's not much there. Also, the scene drags out for too long, and she's in control for too much of the time. Like, we've all had that thing where we've really wanted to get back at someone. Let's say we've rehearsed a speech in our heads, and we then finally encounter that person. We finally get our chance, and then in the moment we're blank, or we splurge out our words, like all our words come tumbling out at once. That shows our vulnerability and our weaknesses, and ultimately our humanity in the moment, or indeed who we are as people. And the same should have happened with Abby. It should have been that she started with this speech, but then starts stumbling over her words, starts losing control, and then it happens far quicker than she anticipated. And let's say she does actually kill Joel, then we see her break down, start crying, and get really emotional. And then that is really when we get a sense of who she is as a person. But in the end, really, it's just her sort of getting revenge. She finally kills him, and then it's almost like, oh, job well done, and she sort of walks off. She's really determined. Now that she's completed her revenge, and then she can leave the scene. I just don't think she changed enough, and we didn't see enough in her in order to be able to empathize with how the scene played out. The other thing with the battle is that we don't get Abby's perspective on it, in the sense that yes, she inadvertently woke up the horde, and she's sort of inadvertently or indirectly responsible for the horde attacking the town. It's like, how does she feel about it? Like, why doesn't she have any feelings on the matter? Also, from the perspective of that little group, if the most well-defended town they've ever seen can so easily, as far as they're concerned, get overrun by this many zombies, why aren't they more worried about zombies attacking Seattle? What makes them think that their home base in Seattle is any safer? We really at least needed more acknowledgement and reaction from Abby and her crew, and that would have added to Abby's character and of course her crew, but also just to the story in general. And so now, going on to the Battle of Jackson, overall the battle was fine. Just in the sense that, yeah, sure, it looked really good. I don't know, the camera angles, the CGI, the practical, whatever, all of that stuff came together, and how it was done in stages. So you see the waves of zombies come in, and then they break through, and then you see Tommy, he's struggling with the flamethrower. The flamethrower looks really cool. And you think, oh no, he's about to die at the end, but then he gets saved. And all of the effects and stuff, and the prosthetics, and the individual zombies coming through, all of that looked really good. It was also really cool how, as the people were shooting, you see the shells, the bullet shells falling to the ground, really showcasing just how many bullets and just how many resources it's taking to defend the town. But then ultimately, the question is sort of to what end? This sort of felt like, oh, it's just another Tuesday, as in this attack could happen anytime. Like in this case, it was just a hapless buffoon in the form of Abby who woke up the zombies, but next time it could just be someone else. Someone else could wake up the zombies, the next horde. This might have been 10,000 zombies with the siege zombie that came in, and next time it could be 15,000 zombies with 2 siege zombies coming in. It sort of really didn't feel like there was much sort of progression or just much in the way of story that was sort of being told there. The other thing was that, talking about Jackson in general, especially when they're going out on their patrols, they're going through the forest and stuff, and especially that part where Joel sees that character. I think there were two of them that were out on patrol. One guy gets killed and the other guy gets bitten, and Joel eventually takes the guy down and shoots him because he knows he's going to turn. And like, on the one hand, yeah, it's a really dramatic scene and all that, and it showcases who Joel is as a person, as a character. But then on the other hand, it's like, why are they patrolling forests? Like, on the one hand, yes, I get it that they need to actually patrol further out from their town. But the thing is, what they should be doing in reality is just cutting down the forests. Like, they should be spending the majority of their time just cutting down all of the forests, all of the trees that are nearby. And that doesn't matter if they literally have to cut them down or if they have to set them on fire or some combination of the two. There are either thousands or even tens of thousands of people in this town. A lot of their resources, a lot of their time should be devoted to just cutting down trees. Maybe there's something I'm missing, but I just didn't really understand why you'd want people just patrolling a random forest when you know there could be these zombies lurking literally anywhere. And so in one sense, that scene where Joel finds that guy that was bitten, yeah, it's dramatic, it's sad, and it's all that. But on the other hand, I'm like, you're just an idiot. Like, what are you doing? Why are you patrolling this random forest knowing that zombies could be literally anywhere? I just felt like he was a buffoon that was asking to get killed. Now, following on from that, the thing you might say against my plan is, oh, what if cutting down all of the trees or setting them on fire draws the attention of the zombies, or like, creates a lot of noise which draws the attention of nearby zombies or whatever. But then on the other hand, they are also creating noise in general, not just the town itself, like let's say on New Year's or whatever, or just in terms of just general noises in the town, like construction noises, but also just the fact that Joel even shot the person. Like the camera zooms out and you see visually just how far the sound travels. He didn't seem very concerned that he could wake up nearby zombies. But even when Ellie goes out with Tommy, they're hunting out zombies and they remark, oh, zombies are a little bit closer than they normally are. In that case, they're not worried about the sound waking up other zombies. And sure, I might be asking too much, and this might be a little bit too much of a nitpick, but I just found it hard to get absorbed into some aspects of like how they live in the town, and especially with that scene with Joel and the guy that got bit. Otherwise, this attack on Jackson, which from my understanding took an additional year to film, that's why it came out 2 years after the original season, is sort of just, like I said, just another Tuesday. It's just an attack that happens, and we really don't hold on to the fact that this massive attack just happened. Tommy lost his brother, people have lost loved ones, and all of these resources have just been spent on defending the town. And we don't really get any of that. It's like, oh, well, the time is up, time to move on. Which I really think does a disservice to just how much effort, obviously, went into this shot. And indeed, the corridor crew themselves were gushing over how good the scene looked and just how realistic it was. But in terms of a story, it amounted to very little. The other thing is, I really did not like the Seraphites in the slightest. They're just dumb dogs with tiki torches and bows and arrows. Meanwhile, they're up against like a really heavily fortified and armored group in the Wolves. And the thing is, we see the Wolves with potentially thousands of members, and we're told that it's a war between them. And I'm thinking, how? And yes, we do like literally see sort of the Seraphites posing a threat, but I never believed it. And I don't think most people did either. The advantage of having guns, or indeed an army in itself, is not just the fact that you have guns. It's the organization behind it. You have an institution that can hold together a group of heavily armored people. And indeed, we see that one scene at the end of, I think, episode 3, where they even have vehicles, and we're shown a tank that the Wolves have. If they have all of this complex machinery and they're able to maintain it, you don't need to rush out and attack these Seraphites who can barely do anything to you anyway. All you have to do is wear them down. It's similar to how the Romans, the ancient Romans, how they wore down Hannibal. After a while, when they lost a few battles against Hannibal initially, top people in charge, they realized that they didn't have to constantly face Hannibal in the field. And all they had to do was, because they had a solid institution behind them, was that they could just sort of almost like ring fence him in. You could keep shadowing Hannibal and eventually you'd starve him of resources. And yes, that takes longer. It's not as satisfying, but that's what an institution can do. And in this case, for example, the Seraphites, they live out in the forest. And in fact, they seem to live out in a forest right next to Seattle. You sort of have this area of Seattle which the Wolves control, and then you have a forest right next to them. Because like they chase Ellie. She's running away from the wolves. They chase her, and then a few of the guys say, "Oh no, we can't go into the forest. It's too dangerous." It's like, why? Yes, in the moment, the forest is too dangerous because the Seraphites control it. But again, you're an institution. You have hundreds, if not thousands of people. Just cut down the damn forest. Like, set it on fire. If these people are such a threat that you're at war with them, you simply starve them out. You don't have to face them on directly. Like, there might have been a few engagements at the start where they face the Seraphites, and then after a few engagements that they realize how dangerous that they are, you just do exactly what the ancient Romans did, what they realized that they could do, using the fact that they're an institution. And so I really hated them from start to finish. The other thing I felt with the entire season, well, firstly, that it was too short. It should have been 10 episodes, much like the first season. But I think that like the quieter parts between the characters were the best parts of the show. And it almost felt like you had the story that the showrunners, the directors or whatever had to tell. But it's almost like the zombies sort of got in the way of that. We have this sort of dynamic, we have this sort of story that's playing out between Dina and Ellie as they're going along their journey. And then it's almost like, oh shit, we've reached the end of the episode. That's right, there are zombies. And so then the zombie horde comes in at the end. It was slightly interesting. I think it was in episode 1 where Dina and Ellie, they go into the building on their own. And then that's where they spot the fact that the zombies are getting smarter. But then at the same time, it's like, why are we allowing these two, 45 kilogram, 1.5 meter tall girls into this building on their own? Like, zombies could be literally anywhere. And so the other thing is with them too, they were too clean. Their clothes and stuff, they was literally too clean. It was almost like they were sort of apart from the world. It's like the world was really grungy, gross. It was like quite dark. And so it sort of felt like those sort of parts were separate from the zombie parts. You never see them have to grapple with like one or two zombies. And that's why the action parts for me were the worst parts of the show, whereas the quieter parts where we see more bonding between the characters were the best parts of the show, even though they definitely still could have improved upon them. However, if they'd made it 10 episodes, it would have given them much more space to do so, especially to do with Ellie and Dina's relationship. I thought that was a little bit too surface level. The other thing was with Dina getting pregnant, it sort of felt like it almost treated them, the fact that they were gay or the fact that they're in a lesbian relationship, it almost treated it like with kids' gloves, just in the sense that obviously two lesbians can't naturally have a child on their own unless they're, of course, they're adopting or there's a father involved. And so in this case, Ellie firstly has a relationship and then she gets pregnant, and then, oh no, she's no longer interested in men and she's interested in Ellie. And then it's almost like it's very neat. She's quite young. I think she's 19 or 20 as well. But the thing is, the fact that like she's pregnant at all is never really interrogated. Well, firstly, she didn't tell Jessie, which I think is pretty bad, but it speaks to who her character is. And also, like, does she want a child? Like, if they're having unprotected sex, like that could be an issue in and of itself. It's like, oh my God, it's so good. It's so happy that she's pregnant. Oh, and now she's going to be able to be in this gay relationship. The fact that she didn't tell the father, the fact that she didn't think that like, oh, it's like, oh, now I can be a mother and Ellie, you can be the father of this baby. And it's only Ellie that happens to mention, oh yeah, there's actually 3 of us. There is a father involved. And that could have been an interesting sort of dynamic to see play out. But it's never interrogated. It's never developed. And otherwise it's sort of brought up as like, oh, it's a good thing that she's pregnant and now that they can have be a family together. But as we're following Ellie and Dina, it all feels too casual. It's almost like they've sort of got a road, a sort of a path that's laid out before them that they're going to take. It's almost like you sort of have this crumbling, decaying city that should be dangerous, but then they're just following a path, sort of casually going through. You don't sort of get a sense of much danger. And yes, we're sort of reminded of it occasionally through dialogue, but we don't sort of get a sense, a sort of a feel of the danger, which we should, because again, we know that zombies can be silent now, they can wait, and all that. And as far as Ellie and Dina know, zombies could be around every single corner. And we just don't see them proceed with enough caution. And so ultimately how I feel is that I was very disappointed with this season. Season 1 was sublime. I really, really liked the pacing. It wasn't just a zombie shoot 'em up. You had really slow burn episodes, like I mentioned with episode 3, seeing those two grow up. I think it was for 10 years or something, 10, maybe 15, 20 years. They're just living a life amongst the zombie apocalypse. And we get slower moments in this, but not enough. And then at the end, Ellie follows through. She goes down, and when she goes down into the aquarium, I think it was, and she has a gun, and she asks the other two friends, where's Abby? And they don't give up the location. Then she shoots. It was quite shocking to me that the other chick was pregnant, and that could have been a really powerful and a really emotional scene. I don't know, maybe I'm misreading the scene, but I sort of felt like with everything that Ellie's seen and done, and in fact she was quite sort of casual, in fact, about the way that she's killed some of these zombies, which I should remind you were former people, and other sort of brutal things that she's seen along the way. Like she saw the massacre of the Seraphites earlier, and the fact that this pregnant girl, she's dying. She says you have to cut it open, and then Ellie gets a knife, and she says, "Oh, how do I do it?" And I can't remember. The chick gives like a sort of a technical medical term. I didn't fully understand, unless I'm misreading the situation. Yes, she's in shock, but I didn't fully understand like why she couldn't at least start cutting. It's sort of like time is of the essence. Even if she like started cutting and it was the wrong way, and when the baby came out, or if the baby didn't come out and was stillborn, yes, that would have been a pretty disturbing scene. But the fact that she killed someone who was pregnant is disturbing on its own anyway. And I sort of didn't fully buy into the fact that she was hesitating about cutting the baby out. But irrespective of that, irrespective of my feelings of that, it was still should have been so much more should have been made of that scene. It should have been so much more dramatic than it was. And they really should have played out more at the end between her and Dina, because like now, yes, Dina's pregnant. Meanwhile, Ellie's literally just killed a pregnant girl. I think there should have been more time to play out a sort of a dynamic between them. But instead, Abby shows up and she instantly kills Jesse. I saw Jesse's death from a mile away, especially where Jesse said, oh, now that I'm a father, because he found out from reading Ellie's sort of facial expressions, now that I'm a father, I can't die either. But this also plays into the fact that he's sort of being treated with kids' gloves. It's almost like him being the father is sort of inconvenient. It's a bit too messy. Them being like three people raising a baby. So yeah, we can take him out, and now they can be lesbians raising a naturally born child. So yeah, he dies, and then Abby's there at the end. And then Abby, well, you hear a shot, and we're supposed to think that Ellie got killed. I very, very much doubt that Ellie got killed. It would have been Dina coming up from behind and then shooting Abby. And then we find out what Abby was doing on day one when Ellie and her group landed in Seattle. And I guess it's supposed to be some big reveal, but I was like, oh, okay. I don't know, maybe I'm misreading it. I didn't fully understand. Maybe this was like a way of the showrunners trying to tell us that, oh no, Abby is a really good person. And she was leading, like in a stadium or something. And she was like leading the light with this new, I don't know, I guess new society or new way of living that's not as violent, doesn't have to attack the Seraphites or whatever. But the fact is, like I mentioned, her taking vengeance takes all of, like the way she did it, sort of takes all that away, and we can't see her as a good person. So yeah, that's my thoughts. Well, firstly on how the scene played out, why the vengeance scene felt wrong, and indeed why the rest of the season was very lackluster. Thank you for watching all the way to the end. I hope you enjoyed the video. Subscribe, rate, and share, all the good stuff. Help me spread my videos, help my channel grow, and I hope to see you guys next time. Thank you for watching.